Hello.
Yeah, my name is Jimmy. I'm a recovered addict.
Hi, Jimmy.
Along the lines that Doug was talking about, you mentioned that sometimes we can find out more clearly what something is by seeing what it is not. One of our packets talks about that in particular. And it lists 4 things that addiction is not. And very simply, I'll just run the top part out. And anybody who has not read this pamphlet could get one right off the table there. These are free for anybody that wants them. Number 1, addiction is not freedom. I think we know that pretty well. Number 2, addiction is not personal growth. If it's anything, it retards us. And addiction certainly is not goodwill. When I came here, I had nothing left, especially as far as goodwill was concerned. I hated everybody, everything, myself more than anything else, I do believe. And above all, addiction is not a way of life. Now, maybe some social users might find it a way of life or a lifestyle that they like, but when it comes to addiction, it certainly is not a way of life, but rather it's a way of death. And it's a way of negation, if I can use that term. So some of the things that we have to do, I believe, at nearly all of our meetings, we touch on it in different ways. And that is, what is our terminology? What do we think addiction is from our experience? Because this seems to be the basis for everything we do. What is our experience as a body? What is my experience as an individual that I can offer that might help somebody else? And these are the things that finally we say addiction, as we understand it, is a compulsion and an obsession. The impulse that Doug spoke about is only one small part of the addict personality. The addict personality is well known. It's been known to psychologists for years. But we have to study it for ourselves so that we know from the inside what we are. And above that, it's an emotional as well as a spiritual problem. It seems that when we hit bottom and are willing to do something about the problem that we face, we have hit a spiritual low. I define that for myself. When I reached that point where I would look in the mirror in the morning and I'd spit at myself because I was not acceptable to me. I could no longer face myself. I cussed myself. I want nothing to do with me, and I couldn't get away from this character who was the addict. And I think these are some of the things that we find out that our terminology suits us best. The compulsion means very simply to us that after having started to use an addictive drug, that I cannot stop. I have to let it run its course. It has to run its cycle. And then the addict, that cycle is a continuous cycle, and it continually gets worse. When we stop and are able to stop when we come to Narcotics Anonymous, no matter what method is used to get us here, we find out that that's about half of the illness. It's gone right there. I don't need anything until I take something. I may want something, but I don't need it. And that need, that urgency, that I can't do without it is gone. And the obsession then is removed by working our steps. Because this brings us to grips with the problem, with powers that we have to find to help ourselves, with ourself, our inner self, to straighten out our life, see what we have to work with, and then our steps as they go along into 7, 8, and 9 take us into relationships with other people on the program, outside the program, our family, our friends, so that we can live a life of freedom, so that we can feel not so much for me comfort as ease. I was never at ease all my life. I was never at ease no matter where I went. In my own family, I was not at ease. I was not at ease with my mother, my brothers, my sisters. I was never at ease as I am today. And I think this is it. Then we find out that when we get into the working part of our steps, that these are the daily things that we face that brings us to what Doug was talking about. How did you do this week? What happened this week that maybe you had to think about more than once and get yourself back in the right direction? I shoot angles. I know that about myself, so I have to be careful. I'm always looking for an easy way. I'm always looking for a few other things that might come my way that I would like to have without paying any prices, you know? And I think this is what all part of addiction. And some things that make up addiction, we mentioned the one, impulsiveness, you know? We have that other thing that's known as, we have a certain word for it, I'd like to just grasp it right now, I've lost it. But inadequate, they call it, inadequate. I never felt that I really was competent to do anything as much as you were competent to do the same job. I hated competition with individuals because I always felt that I was less than, I would lose. See? So here's this, and then we have that spiritual sensitivity. It's not only as a spiritual sensitivity that we use on the program after we're clean for a while, but we use it in a different way. The old way was, you hurt my feelings, therefore I'm going to use, or therefore I'm going to get even with you. And we didn't realize, we always talk about, well, I have no patience. I had any patience. Patience was a virtue I didn't have. Well, I want to tell you, I was a patient man, even in my addiction. If I was going to get even with you, I'd wait 10 years. I did that. I almost killed a man because of it, you know. If somebody hadn't pulled me off, I'd have been doing time for it, you know. This is it. So, yeah, but above all, I think, was that little voice inside me that we all talk about. I call him that little dictator bastard, you know, inside of me that says to me things like, even now you'll say to me, oh, go ahead. So they don't know what the hell they're talking about. So, do it your way. Go ahead, try it. You know, you never tried that drug before. Why don't you take a crack at it? Maybe now you can handle it. These things never attack us the same way twice. They always come from a different angle. And I found out that I used to set things up. I say, well, I will do this if that happens. And again, I'm going into that old intellectual bullshit that I've always used. I solve everything mentally and then rest back and say, oh, isn't that nice? It's all solved now. You know, I put no action into it. And I think above all we find in this program that action really is the magic part of this program for ourselves. What we believe and what we practice, we do it every day to some degree. We come to a meeting. Actually, we come to a meeting like this. As I pointed out to somebody the other night, we perform part of all the 12 steps by coming to a meeting. You know? I reveal myself a little bit to you. You reveal yourself a little bit to me. Sometimes I come to a meeting, I'm down. You can inspire me to try, to grow a little bit, a little more each day. And I think this is what we do mostly for each other. It comes back down to the basic thing. We banded together because nothing else seemed to be helping us. We got together with each other because we can do what I can't do. Hey, that's it. We can do what I can't do alone. And that's about all I have to say.